couple more people here quickly, and sorry, Erin. Yeah, thank you. So I'm Gwen Holdman. I'm the director of the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, and we are we're here today to start to convene the concept behind a Alaska State Working Group around hydrogen, hydrogen generation, storage, use, transport, and different sorts of potential scenarios that are of interest to Alaska. We've asked Pete to join us today, and I'm going to have my co-moderator for today, Erin Whitney, who is the lead for the research we're doing here at ACEP, Alaska Center for Energy and Power, on hydrogen. She's actually working on a Fulbright, under a Fulbright scholarship in Germany right now, looking at the potential applications and collaboration opportunities around hydrogen at the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany. And so I'm going to go ahead and let her go ahead and introduce herself and introduce our speaker. And then after that presentation is over and we have some Q&A, I'd like to ask everyone to stay on and discuss the idea of convening a state working group related to hydrogen technologies if you have time to do that. So Erin, I think I'll just turn it over to you so we can take the most advantage of Pete's time and then save that broader discussion for later, if that makes sense.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Gwen. It's a real honor to have Mr. Pete Devlin here today. He is the Technology Development and Intergovernmental Coordination Manager in the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Fuel Cell Technologies Office at the U.S. Department of Energy. And he is going to present a webinar today on hydrogen and fuel cell technologies, both an overview and provisions in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We're excited about this because hydrogen is getting a lot of press these days. There are opportunities coming down the pike in this Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and we're hoping that Mr. Devlin can illuminate some of those opportunities for us and get us all starting to think as a state about how we may engage. Mr. Devlin is responsible for managing DOE research and demonstration projects for hydrogen and fuel cell technologies for transportation and stationary applications. And prior to his current work, he was responsible for advanced technology development for fuel cell vehicles, hydrogen production R&D, and advanced combustion engine and fuels for a total of almost 20 years at DOE. So Mr. Devlin has lots of experience, and without further ado, I am going to hand the floor over to him to enlighten all of us. So take it away.
Okay, thank you, Erin. And first, a little sound check because you kind of blocked up and went away twice while you were describing what was going on today. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Pete, we can hear you fine, and I could also hear Erin fine. So hopefully it's not a glitch on your end.
Yeah, hopefully it goes away. All right, so thanks Gwen and Erin for the opportunity to speak to you and your group today. As Erin mentioned, my name is Pete Devlin. I'm with the DOE in the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Office. A little bit more about my background. I have the distinction, I guess, of being involved with DOE Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies longer than anyone else. I've actually started the program in 23 years ago and remained on it for those years. And it's a really, I don't know, it's a fascinating area in my opinion. And prior to that, I spent many years in other programs, advanced energy technology programs with DOE for 31 years total. And before that, 12 years in industry working on advanced technologies for energy as well. So that's kind of my background, degreed in engineering at Virginia Tech. So thanks again for giving me an opportunity. I want to get right into it and talk about what we're doing. And hopefully everybody is somewhat familiar with fuel cells and hydrogen. Simply put, it's an energy conversion device that takes hydrogen, strips off the electrons, makes electricity, and then dispels warm water vapors. And so it's extremely clean. The other thing is that fuel cells scale very nicely. It can go from powering a cell phone to powering a truck, a Class 8 truck, or as the picture shows here in the title, a marine vessel, and that is the fuel cell marine vessel that is depicted there. So very scalable. Hydrogen is very versatile in terms of how you can make hydrogen, and so that affords a lot of opportunities for using hydrogen and fuel cells, and so I want to get into that. Okay, so next slide. There we go. So hopefully you can see this slide title, Energy Landscapes and Key Goals. Here's the total primary energy consumption in the US. And you notice renewable is a small wedge, but it's our hope in DOE and the Biden administration's hope that that renewable will grow substantially. You can see wind and solar are still fairly small parts of the total amount for renewable. And there's big plans in the Biden administration to make this wedge much bigger, and wind and solar bigger component of renewables. So the administration is all about net zero emissions by 2050 for all sectors, transportation and power, 100% carbon pollution free electric sector by 2035, which we all know is extremely ambitious. So keep that in mind when you take a look at this. One of the things that this administration is stressing is ensuring benefits for all Americans, and in particular, environmental justice, EJ40 program states that 40% of the benefits of these programs will go to disadvantaged communities. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But those are sort of our marching orders for the programs I'm going to talk about. So, where do we get the hydrogen from? Most of it, 10 million metric tons a year is produced currently, is used for oil refining and fertilizer production. Oil refining to desulfurize the fuels we use every day in our vehicles, and fertilizer is needing hydrogen and nitrogen. So there's a lot of that consumed. About 10% of the 10 million is for fertilizer. Where do we get the hydrogen? In addition to natural gas, it can come from petroleum and nuclear and wind and solar and even geothermal and biomass. So all these sources enable hydrogen to be made in a number of different ways that can make our, our energy much cleaner. So the sources, what do you use it for to make the hydrogen? Electrolysis is a real point of emphasis right now. It changes water into oxygen and hydrogen, using the hydrogen as fuel, and typically venting the oxygen, but it can be used. It's very pure. It can be used for hospitals and things like that. The typical way over on the right side is steam methane and forming methane in natural gas. You can use the steam to convert the methane into hydrogen. And so those are the two big ones today that are used for scale. Others that are looked at, you can make hydrogen from enzymes breaking down plants and produce hydrogen. There's a number of anaerobic plants that make methane that can make hydrogen around the US. And then some of the far-reaching ones include direct solar water splitting, where you can actually have the water split by sun's rays rather than having PV solar convert to electricity and electricity convert to hydrogen through electrolysis. So there's a whole number of ways to do it near term and a little bit longer term. So where are we now? Hydrogen's been around, right? 10 million metric tons already is being made and used every year. 1,600 miles of pipelines around the country, and the world's largest hydrogen storage cavern on the border of Texas and Oklahoma. So we know how to use it. And it's a relatively new idea that we use hydrogen directly for energy conversion. PEM electrolyzers, those are proton electrolyte membrane electrolyzers. And you can see by the bubbles around the country that there's more and more of them being installed. And now there's quite a few of them being installed for energy use, for energy conversion. There's a big plant going in Nevada that will be exclusive for transportation energy, for fuel. And that's a new development. So here's some of the applications over on the left. Backup power, emergency backup power. There's over 8,600 of them around the country, used extensively for phone cell towers that need to be ensured that if the grid goes down, your cell phone still works. So quite a good application there. The big success so far is 50,000 lift trucks or forklifts in over 60 major distribution centers around the country. Forklifts indoors that are powered by fuel cells enable zero emission operation. And the competitor is battery. It's actually a little bit cheaper for the total cost of ownership because it takes about 2 minutes to refuel. And it takes hours to recharge a battery forklift. So that's the value proposition, is it's faster to re-energize, so to speak. And every 7 seconds, there is a forklift being refueled in the US. So the point of that is we know how to refuel safely, hydrogen fuel cell power systems. Quite a lot of PEM electrolyzer work and installations around the country, as you can see from the map there. Buses have been successful in some key areas in Northern California, in Cleveland, Ohio, and Las Vegas, Nevada. So those have been very successful. Retail stations, quite frankly, are very expensive, and that's why there aren't enough of them. And they're primarily in California, where the California state government has paid for a lot of the infrastructure installation. But you can see there's already 12,000 fuel cell cars being used, again, primarily in California. But other states have work underway as well. And you see all the alphabet there, but the ones that have stations already built or getting permitted right now are Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Jersey. So those stations will be coming online soon. So there has been some success already. We want to push though, and not just for road vehicles, but for a whole lot of other applications. So we have H2 at scale, which simply means using all the applications that we can possibly create power from, or create energy, or use hydrogen for different purposes to get the cost of the fuel down. We need the volume to get the cost of fuel down. So this picture sort of shows that it's not just transportation at the top of the bubble chart here in the middle, but also you can make synthetic fuels, e-fuels for aviation, e-methanol and things like that. We've already talked about oil upgrades and desulfurization, but fertilizer is another big user of hydrogen. Steel making, you need hydrogen for direct iron ore reduction. And most hydrogen is made from steam methane reforming right now. It could be made from renewable powered electrolysis, and that would be what we call green hydrogen and green ammonia. So lots of opportunities coming up in steel, ammonia, cement, possibly, as well as transportation, trucks, marine buses, and so forth. And then there's the grid itself, which is becoming more and more renewable. And renewable sources like solar and wind are variable energy sources. And when they're at their peak, but in production, and they're not, you don't need as much in the consumption side, you need long duration storage, and that's where hydrogen can be stored and used later for power when it's needed. So I already mentioned that there's 10 million metric tons a year of hydrogen production. If we had 10 million more online, that would necessitate, if it was green hydrogen or hydrogen without any carbon dioxide, necessitate doubling what we have today in solar and wind that's deployed. So that's a really, big, ambitious goal to have green hydrogen. Lots of jobs associated with hydrogen fuel cells when it's deployed at scale. And that's one of the estimates of that. I need to explain that we have a portfolio of activities, research development, demonstration, and deployment, and it's all in this booklet here that you can go and get, the Hydrogen Program Plan. It's not just the office that I'm in, the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies office. There are other offices around DOE, and here's the alphabet soup of programs here. But the fossil energy, carbon management, FECM is quite involved. Nuclear energy, NE, Office of Electricity Reliability, OE, and ARPA-E is the Advanced Research Project Agency inside DOE. The key players in the field include these offices, and I must say that in addition to industry and universities, U.S. national labs are quite heavily involved. National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado, Sandia National Labs in both Albuquerque, New Mexico, and San Francisco Bay Area, and in Oak Ridge National Lab in Tennessee. So all these labs are contributing to some of the goals associated with hydrogen and fuel cells. So what do we want? We want, we got to get the cost down, and we got to get more clean hydrogen made from renewable sources. We need safe hydrogen storage and delivery. Some labs are working specifically on that, and have these end uses that can actually be deployed at scale to ensure that we get the fuel costs down and infrastructure built. We need a full infrastructure being built to make this all happen. And workforce development is certainly important, and environmental justice priorities I'll talk a little bit more about. Some of the things that are in that booklet I showed you, the hydrogen plan, that are noteworthy in the near term, upper left side, electrolysis. Low and high temperature are a key focus area. Low temperature is polymer electrolyte membranes, and high temperature is typically solid oxide membranes. High temperature gives you a better efficiency. And if you have a steady state operation, it's, that's an advantage. So that there's some reasons for going high temperature. Low temperature, if you have fluctuation in operation in terms of power demand, then that's a better option, because it can go up and down the scale in terms of what power is needed. Tube trailers are what's being used now to transport gaseous hydrogen primarily. We know we need more liquid hydrogen as we get into these bigger, fuel cell applications, heavy duty applications such as trucks and vessels, marine vessels, and so forth. You need better volumetric density of the fuel. Hydrogen is great on a gravity standpoint. It's better than just about anything else, certainly better than fossil fuels. But on a volume standpoint, it's like 1/8 of what you would have for diesel fuel. And so you need, really big tanks for gaseous hydrogen. You have to have very high compression. Liquid, you cut that need volume problem in half, and also the pressure problem is much less. So we need that. We need liquid hydrogen, and we know we need to have pipelines to have a true hydrogen infrastructure in the US. And so we've studied a lot, different pipeline materials. If you caught a webinar yesterday, you heard about all the different aspects of using hydrogen blended into the natural gas pipelines. There's some very interesting research going on there that shows, kind of defies some of the things we thought were true in terms of what we thought we knew for welds and pressure. As it turns out, welded parts of pipes aren't any more vulnerable than the actual extruded walls of pipes. And that was news to me just yesterday. So we're constantly finding out new things about these technologies. And longer term also includes some of the things that will be particularly technologically challenging, like reversible fuel cells. You have a fuel cell that can operate to create power, or you can have a fuel cell that reverses itself and operates to make hydrogen. Very interesting idea. Lots of technical challenges to make that happen. So the hydrogen fuel cell programs are getting quite a big boost in support by this administration. The Secretary of Energy, Granholm, launched the hydrogen shot. It was the first Earth shot of several. And we have a catchy little phrase for that Secretary Granholm came up with. It's 111, $1 for 1 kilogram of hydrogen within 1 decade. So she is challenging us, Jennifer Granholm is challenging us in DOE to come up with cheap hydrogen and do it soon rather than continuously researching incrementally, come up with some parallel paths and move faster. We had a summit where the Secretary again in a webinar described what we were doing, and I'll show you some results on that. But we definitely have the support of this administration to move and move very quickly. So yeah, in the summit, I wanted to show you that we had, thousands of participants. As you can see the numbers up there, some big name people, former Secretary John Kerry, Bill Gates, CEOs. And the most important thing was the survey we did at the summit that I think tracks very well with what a lot of us have been aware of for quite some time. So the number one challenge is the cost to the end user. Fuel cells are still too expensive, and hydrogen fuel is too expensive. The next one is, on the pink there, is infrastructure. The next thing is the fuel infrastructure is lacking. We've got some infrastructure in California, a little bit in northeast of the US, but that's really the extent of it. And so that needs to change for wide scale use of hydrogen fuel cells. I was a little surprised at public awareness and understanding. I guess we need to get out and tell people more about what's going on. And that's a lesson for us. And we still need some technology advancements. We're still working on getting the precious metal needed inside the fuel cell to be reduced so that it costs less and it still produces the durability we need to be competitive with other power systems. So these are very interesting things that I want to share with you. We did a request for information from around the country asking you to tell us, what you think are the really key factors in setting up regional clusters of hydrogen for use in fuel cells. And we went by, geographic areas and found out some very interesting things. There we go. So Alaska and Hawaii, and this includes Hawaii, geothermal and solar and ocean were flagged as possible renewable. I think the ocean part came from Hawaii. Ocean thermal energy conversion is popular. They have the only OTEC system in the country. Backup power and remote power for isolated communities, very important, and those responses came from Alaska. You can see the other ones as well, where other parts of the country are thinking about where their needs are and what hydrogen can do in their region. And I won't read them out. I think, we'll get you these slides at the end, but there's a very good array of different needs and uses of hydrogen and fuel cells around the country. And it's very valuable to have these requests for information. to find out what everybody's thinking before we start setting up our strategies and moving forward. So I mentioned that we get great support from the current administration. We also get great support from the current Congress, and that is we have a new infrastructure law. It's called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that was just passed in mid-November, still relatively recently, and it's got some big programs in it. So I wanted to point that out to you. We have $9.5 billion for clean hydrogen, $1 billion for electrolysis research, development, and demonstration, $500 million for manufacturing and recycling R&D for both fuel cells and hydrogen production equipment, and $8 billion for at least 4 regional clean hydrogen hubs. So, this is perfect. Stars are aligning here. We've got the administration setting out the hydrogen shot and saying that we're going to reduce the cost of hydrogen to $2 by 2026. And we've got Congress passing this bill, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, that says, here, do all these programs, and at the end here, also do a national hydrogen strategy and roadmap. How are we going to get there for full scale of hydrogen as one of our energy resources in the U.S. Very exciting times. What do we mean by hubs? What is a hub? Well, here's a depiction of one, and it's just an illustration. And in fact, to be honest, I don't even like part of it. We've got an aircraft in there for transportation, and aircraft are going to be very difficult to convert to hydrogen fuel cells for lots of reasons. Closer to near term would be rail and small marine vessels. But anyway, so here's all the pieces that could come together, any and all of them: nuclear energy, renewable, solar, and wind, possibly. Making hydrogen through electrolysis. You can make hydrogen by reforming methane or pyrolysis of biofuels. And with carbon capture, CCS, and sequestration, it can be as clean as the electrolysis side if it's properly done. So let's not leave that out as an option. Residential commercial heating will be difficult for a number of reasons. First of all, you have to blend into the existing natural gas pipeline, and it's going to have to be extremely inexpensive to be competitive. So beyond the technology, some of the key parts of these hydrogen hubs include environmental justice, engaging the community, not just saying, hey, we're going to build this hub in your neighborhood, creating jobs, creating training programs, ensuring that labor standards are met, that these are not inexpensive offshore kinds of technologies that are coming to the U.S. They have to be made in the U.S. There's a very strong statement on made in America that will be followed. Include everybody in the decision making and make it equitable so that we don't just plunk down some big facility and not let communities know what's going on. And then it has to be commercially sustainable. We're going to help start it with the $8 billion, but we're going to need to make sure that the actual performers, the ones that make the hubs and run the hubs, can make money off of these products and keep it going after the DOE money has been expended. And obviously, U.S. manufacturing is going to be part of it. Again, that Made in America is a huge part of this effort. And so the making of these products and components are going to be made almost exclusively in the U.S. I think 55% of the cost of every component or system has to be, from the U.S. So there won't be any offshore sourcing of this equipment. A little bit more, I mentioned the clean electrolysis program. And the goal there is $2 by 2026. We're just kicking that off. We had a request for information that's just become due, and we're sifting through everybody's comments now and figuring out how to structure this program. Manufacturing and recycling will be extremely important. We want to make sure that things like the precious metal and fuel cells and electrolyzers is extracted at the end of the equipment's life and completely reused. Some of this precious metal is almost completely sourced by offshore companies, and we want to ensure that these materials are, retained and kept in the U.S. For regional hubs, we're going to have at least 4 hubs, and they will be geographically diverse. So we'll include a hub for renewables, a hub for fossil and carbon capture and sequestration, for nuclear energy, and we'll have an array of multiple uses. This is not just a transportation play or a stationary power play. It's all the above for different energy conversion systems. And so that will ensure that we get the maximum chance for hydrogen at scale over the long haul. We're doing a hydrogen strategic roadmap right now, and this work includes development of the definition of an initial definition of clean hydrogen production standard, which by law is stated as less than 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide per kilogram of hydrogen. So we need to define that a little better and refine it as necessary. So how do we do these hubs anyway? This is our scheme for it. Right now we're in front of that phase 1. We just received hundreds of requests for information inputs from everybody, and we're sifting through that to figure out how to consider that or incorporate that input into a solicitation for proposals. We anticipate, around 8 or 12 awards for the first phase, and not the whole 8 billion, right? For the first phase, it would be a smaller amount, and we'll have the awardees describe their plan for the big hub deployment, phase 2, and how they intend to pull all the pieces together and make a hub in their region. So then we'll do an evaluation and determine which ones go forward with phase 2, maybe 4 to 6 awards, and $500 to $1 billion a piece. The law requires that these awards will be met on a 50-50 cost share basis. So if it's $1 billion of DOE money, it's $1 billion of industry or whoever is proposing of their resources as well. So the hub design will require diversity, equity, and inclusion principles, and that will be monitored throughout the development of the hubs. I want to mention something that we came up with to help facilitate this whole effort. We call it H2 Matchmaker. And what that means is we're trying to get the hydrogen producers, the end users like cars or something like that, the infrastructure developers like the companies that make refueling stations or build stationary power systems, and other stakeholders aware of them, so of each other, and work with each other. So we came up with this idea of having this mapped, and you can see this is an example of different sectors associated with matchmaking to facilitate and enable the coming together of suppliers and end users primarily. And so right in the middle of this is a Justice 40, and we've asked those that participate in that to tell us if they're an environmental justice relevant entity and where you are. So you see these little circles showing which ones are environmental justice entities. And what we're asking is just to self-identify who you are. And so we put it out on this map, and others will get in touch with you to see if there's some common interests and see if there's a way you can work together. So if you go to H2-Matchmaker, if you want to take a look and check it out, maybe even fill out one of these little forms, you'll be on the map. And that way people will know what you're doing or what you want to do in the way of hydrogen fuel cells, and make yourself available for partnering with different entities. So I want to make you aware of that. You can at least go and check it out and look at the map and see who's on there. I think we've got over 200 now. We only had it up for a little more than a month, and we've had tremendous interest in this, and we hope it becomes a real enabler. So the strategy and roadmap, I want to talk about that real quickly. We don't have much time on this. Congress said, give us your strategy and roadmap by May 14th. Quite frankly, we didn't think that was possible, and our senior leaders have told us, make it happen. So we're really in a hurry on this roadmap and strategy, but we've had a number of stakeholder engagements on the ideas associated with different kinds of technologies and how they could be deployed, demoed and deployed. And so we've had a couple of NASIO meetings, National Association of State Energy Offices, several webinars open to everybody, and some interagency meetings to show what we've got and provide and allow input to happen by government entities. So we're moving very fast on this because we need to get it to Congress by May the 14th. But I wanted to make you aware of it, that this is something that you may want to plug into and have some say in it. So with this strategy and roadmap, we're not just going to shoot darts at a board here. There's been a lot of analysis, regional analysis with the technologies and the resources, both renewable and otherwise, by a number of different entities, primarily the national labs. You see NREL down in those hot links. They've done quite a lot. And this map shows on the left side that if you only look at photovoltaic and onshore wind and take into account what the demand would be for various scenarios, there's only a few places in the country that have a deficit in terms of not enough wind and photovoltaic to meet the expected end use demand. And that's what that's showing here, with the red being those areas that are in a deficit potentially. It also shows where the nuclear power plants are in the big green circles there. A very interesting set of documents that provides a basis for coming up with a national strategy. So yeah, as I mentioned, we have to have this done 180 days from the actual law being passed. And so we're kind of breaking this down into bite sizes, near term, 2 years, midterm 7, up to 7 years, and longer term, 15 years. One of the things that we're trying to do is show where would the demand come from down the lower right here, and what effect would that have towards getting towards the $2 a kilogram. Made some pretty broad assumptions. 20% of the trucks use fuel cells, medium and heavy duty trucks. And we're working hard to get the research done to make that happen. That's 5 million metric tons of hydrogen a year. And you can see it has an effect of reducing the cost, just the sheer volume, from over $6 to just right under $5. And then these other areas, sustainable aviation fuels. That's another big shot from this administration. And it includes e-fuels, and those e-fuels use hydrogen. If you use renewable hydrogen, there's a goal of 3 billion sustainable aircraft fuel gallons in 4 years. If you used hydrogen to enhance that fuel, it would have a big effect here by that step you see. And there's other things that can provide a large impact on the fuel cost. I mentioned before that iron ore reduction and steel making is very intensive in terms of hydrogen use. Well, you can see if we had all the steel plants, 12 million metric tons in the US, that we have an effect there. And injection into the natural gas network is 16 million metric tons. And all these things contribute to getting this cost way, way down. We're doing different scenarios from the 55.5 million metric tons up to over 100. And what would that do to reduce the carbon emissions? In this study, it could reduce carbon emissions globally by 10 to 20%. So hydrogen can have a real impact on reducing greenhouse gases worldwide. And there we go. So I want to show a few program efforts so you kind of see from the ground level the things that we've been interested in the past, that maybe there's interest in Alaska for doing stuff like this. Here's a couple projects that are underway. On the left side, there's a project with a number of technologies being used. And really, the idea here is if you use stationary power and vehicle fueling, you can have better utilization of the equipment associated with making the hydrogen and using the hydrogen, as well as the power that results from it being more resilient, because it would be off grid. So this is a small project we're doing, 75 kilograms of hydrogen from steam methane reforming from landfill gas. This is our second project like this. So, you're basically coming out ahead in terms of renewable, that is a renewable source. And you electrolyze to make hydrogen, and you can use it for fueling. In this case, 7 to 10 fuel cell electric vehicles will be running around in Austin, Texas. Power for a data center at the University of Austin. And also looping into the Port of Houston, that is very interested in becoming a leader in terms of hydrogen fuel cells. So that gets everybody sort of on the same page. Over on the right side, there's a Florida project with Plug Power. And this is all about using renewables, solar and some wind, to allow for the variability of the power source, and storing the hydrogen when it's not needed, and using it for both stationary power, making the grid smoother, power grid smoother, and also used for vehicles. So these are a couple of projects that are underway. We call them integrated energy projects, but very, very interesting. Some other things we've been doing, and I'll just quickly go through it. CTE is the Center for Transportation Energy. They've got this demonstration of UPS trucks. This is a huge fleet, over 200,000 of these trucks running around the country. And this is a hydrogen fuel cell delivery van demonstration that enables basically zero emission vehicle operation. And another plus is it's operating in a disadvantaged community in California. Over on the right side, many years of effort by DOE and DOT's, Department of Transportation's Federal Transit Authority, to show that hydrogen fuel cells can operate for long lives in transit bus operations. And so you see these 38 buses, 25,000 hours is really about the life of a heavy duty truck, which is quite high. We call it 1 million miles. And 32 hours for one of those buses. Now, having said that, there's always some devil in details there. Some of these buses do lose voltage, and as a result, the fuel economy goes down. So we've still got some research work to do there to get that voltage degradation knocked out so that they can really compete with a diesel bus all the way to the, the equivalent of what a diesel bus, operates to, 25 to 30,000 hours. We're spending a lot of time and money on heavy duty trucks, some on medium, and we're hoping that we can get fuel cell trucks to operate in the same durability regime as diesels, 30,000 hours without significant degradation in operation. And we've got 3 projects underway to do that. For marine, you saw the picture on the front. We've got a project with a company in San Francisco to build a floating refueling station, basically. And this is pretty exciting because we're getting power from a renewable source. It's being cabled in from hydropower in San Francisco. And you take the renewable power, you make hydrogen on board this barge, and you refuel this fuel cell vessel. The fuel cell vessel is ready to go. We're building the refueling station now. And the idea here is that this could enable refueling, actually in the water for vessels around the world. Here's the numbers for a ferry boat. The status of fuel cells is dollars per passenger mile is still high because the cost of the fuel cell is too high and the cost of fuel is too high, but not that far off. So if we can get particularly the fuel costs down and to some extent the storage costs down, you can see on the right side without too much of a stretch that you could be competitive. So the numbers here for buying a fuel cell at $323 a kilowatt, if you went down to 80 and then went down to 60, you would be competitive, in fact, at 60 with $4 per fuel. You could actually beat a diesel in terms of total cost of ownership. Very exciting project. Rail is another one that could be near term. Here's the numbers from our estimates with fuel costing $7.50 a kilogram. Kilogram is equivalent to a gallon of gasoline on an energy basis. So just think gallon. And again, you get the cost of the fuel cell down, you get the cost of fuel from $7.50 to $3, and you're below a diesel for these, what they call multiple units, which are passenger trains. There's one being built now in San Bernardino County in California. And there's a switcher locomotive that we're helping with in Sacramento, California. So exciting times for rail as well. So I want to talk very quickly about environmental justice. So what does all this environmental justice mean? Well, there's an executive order that says that 40% of all the benefits of certain federal investments, which includes the ones I mentioned in previous slides, need to go to disadvantaged communities. So the first thing we got to do is define the disadvantaged communities. And how do we define the investments? Well, in the case that I showed you, it's to get these hubs and electrolysis R&D projects going. And then how to measure this is what we're working on now, to make sure that the investments are as planned. So those are kind of the basics of, the Justice 40 initiative. What is a disadvantaged community? The Census Bureau gave us the answer to that. There's 13,000 tracts in the Census Bureau, and 18.6% of them are in disadvantaged areas. And disadvantage is defined as those areas that have vulnerability in terms of grid stability and power, over dependence on fossil, energy burden. And that means that people are paying too much of their paychecks to pay their energy bills, both the power for their homes and businesses or the fuel for their vehicles. So these are kind of the rough ideas of what is a DAC or a disadvantaged community, and how do we work on these areas to make sure that they get 40% of what we're doing in these big projects. And that's what will be in our solicitation request for proposals. And just point that out because you can see Alaska over there with the big purple in the middle and down in the south. That there's some areas there that could be, an advantage to get, some of this activity in those areas. There'll also be a technical assistance opportunity that we have set up. It's called the Community's Local Energy Actions Program, or CLEAP, that will help disadvantaged communities set up their planning for transitioning to clean energy, including hydrogen and fuel cells. So the justice system, the DOE Justice 40 system is, what are we trying to do? The energy burden, I already mentioned. You shouldn't have to pay a big part of your paycheck just to get your power and your fuel. Environmental exposure and burdens. I think we all know that some of the parts of the country that are in areas with heavy diesel use, ports, rail yards, the asthma levels in those areas are much higher than the rest of the country. That's an environmental exposure, right? So we want to address that. We want to make sure that there is parity in terms of cost and usage for clean energy. And that includes hydrogen fuel cells, hydrogen made from renewable sources. We need to get more low-cost capital to these areas to clean up the energy that they're using and make clean energy enterprises inside these DACs, things like hubs, to give the opportunity for jobs, job training. In so doing, because a lot of the DACs have poor grid, service, where there's lots of outages, more than the rest of the grid, and basically give the DACs a voice in deciding their kind of energy future is what it's really all about. So I hope that helps give you an idea of some of the things we're doing. I encourage you to take a look at it, not only the hydrogen matchmaking, but these monthly webinars we have. We had one just 2 days ago on pipelines. It's very interesting, state of the art, but delivered in the webinar so that everybody can really understand it fairly, really easily. These are other resources. If you're working on a hydrogen project, you might want to check out safety lessons learned in our H2 tools. Go to the Global Center for Hydrogen Safety, which was established in the US and it's being used around the world at this point. And we have an annual merit review. You can sign up. It'll be virtual again this year, so you can go to any session you want, find out more, a lot more than some of the things I just touched on in this briefing. Don't forget Hydrogen Fuel Cell Day, October 8th. The atomic weight of hydrogen is 1.008. So October 8th is the day to celebrate hydrogen. And it's actually in the national law that was passed. So, we're trying to establish it as a day that everybody can enjoy and, work on hydrogen events. So thank you. I hope this was useful and I'm glad to answer any questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Pete. That was just a wealth of information, and I know that we're almost at the end of the hour here and you need to run. We have almost 20 questions, and so I'm just going to briefly give a heads up to everyone about our own Alaska Hydrogen Workshop next Tuesday and Wednesday. You can find more information and how to sign up at alaskasustainableenergy.com. That'll be from approximately 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Alaska time next Tuesday and Wednesday. And I can tell there's just lots of questions and lots of great material here. And I think what this really highlights is the need for this working group to come together and tackle some of these questions. So Pete, do you have time for a couple questions, or do you have to run?
Let's go with 2 or 3. How about that?
2 or 3, okay. And I will apologize in advance because I cannot ask all of them. So, you know, maybe we can follow up even with some emails, or we can use this as future material for working groups. So one question that I think would encapsulate a couple of the questions that I'm seeing is the vision for marine shipping and marine vessels. And you had one slide about that, of course, but you know, I think that's a real opportunity for Alaska. So how does that fit into this overall hydrogen vision?
So it does fit in, and I showed you that project we're working on to create a hydrogen refueling barge. There's a hydrogen fuel cell vessel that's partially funded by government, not our organization, but the California Energy Commission. And so there'll be some information available. There's also another group coming together called the Fast Harbor Clean Energy Coalition, run by somebody who used to work directly for us, Dr. Joe Pratt. So you could check that out. That will be for smaller vessels, including things like fishing vessels, right? It may be relevant to some Alaskans. So we've got to start kind of slow. On the big picture, we're part of an international group called Mission Innovation Zero Emission Shipping. It's got very lofty goals of having trans-ocean container ships that would be operated with hydrogen or other alternative zero emission fuels like ammonia for you know, large trans-ocean ships. So there's some of that. If you want to check out Mission Innovation Shipping, you could learn all about that. But yeah, so closer to home, fuel cells offer a competitive advantage in terms of performance against diesels for marine vessels that have variable loads. If you're running flat out like the trans-ocean ship, there's not a big advantage energy efficiency wise for a fuel cell over diesel. It's about 5% energy. But when you're, you know, starting and stopping like tugboats or fishing boats or stuff like that, then diesels don't operate very efficiently at low power levels, and fuel cells do. They only follow the load and use the energy they need for that load at any given second, right? So there's a big advantage for smaller vessels, and that may be something of interest to Alaskans.
Okay, thank you, Pete. That was a great answer with lots of good resources. I'm so glad we're recording this conversation. One other question that I'm hoping will encapsulate a couple threads here is the role of you know, intermediate hydrogen carriers in the scope of the vision, and also within the H2 Matchmaker system. That's also probably an opportunity for Alaska, you know, thinking about things like ammonia, et cetera. Can you comment on that at all?
Sure. So yeah, ammonia, let's start with that one and say that, you know, if every ammonia plant in the US switched to clean hydrogen, that is hydrogen from electrolysis from renewable power, we would see a tremendous scale difference and cost difference on hydrogen. And that's pretty exciting itself. Having said that, the cost of hydrogen from steam methane reforming for ammonia is about $1 now. So that's a pretty tough thing to do. But ammonia can certainly be a contributor. One of the problems with ammonia for transportation is that it's not a big volumetric energy carrier either. It's not as good as diesel. It's only a little bit better than hydrogen. And so ammonia does have its limitations as an energy carrier, but it could still be useful. If you use ammonia in an engine, you're going to have a big after treatment system to take care of the NOx. It's going to have to run at high temperatures and create a lot of oxides of nitrogen that will have to be treated, just like the diesel trucks of today. Can be done, but it's extra step, lowers efficiency and increases the cost. But ammonia can be helpful.
Thank you for that. I don't want to run over too much, so I want to hand the floor back over to Gwen to wrap it up with some larger context and comments. Again, Pete, this is wonderful, such a wealth of information here. I think I'm going to go back and listen to this recording again as well.
Yeah,
so, go ahead, Gwen.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. And so, whoops, actually, hang on. I'm logged in twice here. Apologize. So, one thing that we might want to do in working with the Arctic Energy Office and George Rowe, who probably in and of himself generated a good portion of these questions, we might collate some of these. We're going to try to start up this working group and have some regular opportunities for dialogue and information sharing. And so we might check back in with you and others at DOE to try to get some other speakers or other, reports or whatever we could to get a little bit more of a better understanding of some of these areas. I think every one of us has learned a little bit from you today in different topic areas. And so we really do appreciate your time and hope to make this an ongoing engagement with the Department of Energy.
Sure. Hey, it was my pleasure, and good luck with starting up your hydrogen group there, and let us know if we can help in any way.
Thank you so much to everyone for attending, and thank you again, Pete, for your time and all of these insights. I think this is just the start of our conversation.
Very good. All right. Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.